So, looking ahead to blueprint development and actionable next steps. So, my next question has three parts to it. So, bear with me. And I'd like, there's going to be sort of 3 points of view. So, the question is, what operational recommendations can be proposed to address each one of the identified challenges and improve equitable access to genomic medicine? You have all kind of touched on this already, but Dr. Romeo, from an economic evaluation point of view, followed perhaps by Dr. Quinones with the pharmacogenomics, and then Dr. Moreno from that research and multidisciplinary efforts. Dr. Romeo, if you'd like to just kick off.
We have enough people to do the usual evaluation, but you have to increase information. For example, in Colombia, we don't have enough bioinformaticians to make the different models, the mathematical models, to see what happened with all of this. I don't know what happened in the rest of Latin America, but for example, it was of the inputs what they don't have enough people to deal with this. This is, for example, a point. The methods around the world about health economics or HTA are similar. We don't have many differences, and maybe all of them are very contextual and local, but this is the way that you made HTA. But we need more bioinformaticians, people who is modeling all the time, and maybe have some train. You have to get enough curve of training to do this easily, like any other topic in medicine or in health too.
Thank you. And Dr. Quinones?
I think we have the same problems that Colombia, probably. It's the same thing. We have some infrastructure, and we have some resources, human resources, but we don't have some specific areas. We don't have enough bioinformaticians as well. So it's important to address that. I have some probably recommendations, I don't know, of actionable and operational actions. For example, to set up a specialized training program in precision medicine, for example, and in pharmacogenomics for clinicians. It's important in our area to get subsidies from genomic and pharmacogenomic testing from governments. Here, government can collaborate with the pharmaceuticals company to support financially, yes, those tests in, for example, high impact diseases, cancer and cardiovascular diseases, for example. It is necessary, I think, to develop national and regional genomic and pharmacogenomic guidelines based in ethnic profiles, which is very important in the region, we know. To develop regulation, clear regulation, aligned with the global standards. I'm talking about ethical and sanitary or similar issues. To establish Latin American genomic pharmacogenomic databases to support research and drug development. I know we are trying to do it, but it's not enough, or it's not functional still. To establish some educational program to the public, using maybe media campaign and partnership with community organizations, maybe develop some apps and platforms that offer personalized treatment or drug response recommendation based in genomic profiling. It would be a very good idea, but I don't know if it's possible. Finally, again, establishment of regional genomic funding programs, because we don't have regional financial program to develop genomic medicine research and tools. I suggest requesting to government allocate a specific budget for genomic multinational research in Latin America, perhaps through a new PAHO program. It is almost a dream for me.
Great, thank you. And Dr. Moreno.
Yes, so I would think about maybe two recommendations that should go in parallel, right? I totally agree with Dr. Roballo and Dr. Quiñones on the limitations that we are facing in our countries, that, not enough bioinformaticians. Genomic data is not easy to handle, requires people that knows, how to process all that data, storage, infrastructure, all that. So we can train more people. We can, of course, build, workshops. We are actually actively doing that all the time, but, that's slow and that's expensive. It requires, to train the trainer and then to deploy a lot of people who are doing that, in almost like step by step. But the other thing that I think can be faster and has a more massive scale is increased accessibility to what already exists. And I think we have a big responsibility, researchers that are leading big biobanks in Latin America. I will give an example. The project that I'm leading here in Mexico, which is the Mexican Biobank Project, has created a nationwide resource. It's not as big as the UK Biobank, it's way smaller, but still the value is that it's nationwide. So it's very valuable for any clinician or researcher or student in the country to know what is the frequency of a given variant that, it's of interest for whatever reason, for research or for treatment. So what we are developing right now, besides of publishing the paper, which is just maybe very limited in the analysis we can do in that 5 pages and that's it. What we really want to improve is in that everyone can browse the data. And what we're doing right here in the lab is to develop a web-based platform so that people can enter the gene of interest, the variant of interest, and then it automatically creates a map of allele frequencies by risk variance of all the variants that have been already mentioned before. I think PharmGKB, that have been validated by ClinVar, by OMIM, by GWAS catalog. So we want to know what are the profile of those in our population. And just like Dr. Pereira mentioned before, it's not the same to just be Mexican and that's it, or be Colombian or Brazilian. It's like your genome is a combination of different ancestral populations. So we want to know what the frequency in your given background in that position of that particular risk variant, because even if it's of a different ancestry profile, African, European, indigenous, may be very different in a given same state of Mexico, depending on this ancestry. So this platform is built to explore those frequencies depending on the ancestry, not of the individual, but of the haplotype that this particular risk variant is segregating in the population. So I think that's something that requires, a way smaller development in terms of the staff needed for do that, but then it scales up in terms of the applicability and accessibility it can provide, because it can be useful for clinicians, for medical doctors, researchers, and they don't need to know how to handle the whole genomic data. It's supposed to be a user-friendly, or we hope to release it soon so you can tell us how user-friendly it is, but that's the idea, that people can browse the data and benefit from these large efforts that costed already a fortune to generate. And it's very rare to have this kind of project of the scale in our country. So I think that's something that we should encourage. Other examples, like Dr. Pereira mentioned, the one that Iscal developed with BIPMED in Brazil, it's another good example of those kind of tools. So I think that's a way we can encourage accessibility. And Rebecca, I don't know if we lost you. Can you guys hear me? Can you still hear me? Luis,
Yes.
Ligia, Yana?
Yes,
Okay.
we can hear you. And Rebecca, I think it's frozen.
It's
And-
fine.
Okay.
And if I may, just following on what Dr. Estrada said, this is extremely important to have the frequencies available, because that's an immediate impact that these programs have, is to help the interpretation of genetic variants, the clinical interpretation of genomic variants within the population. And I'll get in touch with you, because I'm very interested in this tool, to look at it based on the local ancestry, if that's what I understood.
Sure.
But one thing that I advocate so we want the data to be open, but at the same time, we want to foster local R&D, local researchers. So one thing that I advocate here in Brazil in terms of our, the data from the Genomas Brasil program is that we have privileged access first to Brazilians, to Brazilian groups. And of course, these Brazilian groups can collaborate with whoever they want in the world. But with that, we'll make sure that we're not just generating, the primary products, but we are also profiting from the insights and the science that will come out of it. And so these privileged access for a certain period of time, they will compensate our competitive disadvantage in terms of, the human resources in bioinformatics and the infrastructure. Because one thing that, I really don't want to happen is that we just generate the data and all the discoveries be made elsewhere. We need to participate in that. And so I think this is one way that we can do that. And even if you collaborate with a foreign group, that foreign group will have to teach the local group what they're doing, how to use the data. And after a period of time, then the data can be, more broadly accessible, like the UK Biobank and all the other data banks. But we need some competitive advantage in the region and so that's my plan.
Thank you. And apologies for my dip off there, but great to be back. So there's a couple of really great questions actually that sort of follow up from what you've been talking about, Dr. Pereira, in terms of data. So one of the questions we have here is around the partnership between those collecting data and those giving data. So the question is around how do the speakers today find out what matters to their patients and the public? We know from examples like Genomics England, the Genomics England project, how much can be achieved with these sorts of partnerships. What kind of engagement is happening there? I don't know who would like to take that.
Do you mean between the scientists and the participants of these biobanks?
Yeah, I think so. I think patients are understanding more and more what the value of their data and what it means, but there are certainly always questions around security and what negative things can come from understanding more about data and what happens to that. And there have been some high-profile situations here in the UK recently. So I'm just curious to understand, what kind of communication and engagement is happening with the community to help them understand the importance of genomic data and how it's being collected.
So I'll start. In my case, we're doing a population-based recruitment. We're not dealing with specific disease groups. And for that public, there are two things that, two value propositions for them to participate in. The first one is sort of an altruistic thing to help develop precision medicine in Brazil, to include the Brazilian population in this medicine of the future. And so this is a very strong value proposition. The second one is that when we recruit participants, they go through a checkup because we want to collect very granular health information, and having a free checkup is also a very good value proposition. But of course, all this has to be within, a very strict ethical framework and data protection, and we have all those legislations in Brazil in place, and you have to make sure you're using the best practices for data protection. That's, as the best we can do. It doesn't guarantee that your data will not be leaked or anything, but it's the best we can do.
Thank you. And I have one very quick question, but more question because I know we're running out of time. But I'm really interested in understanding the role that advocacy groups are making in Latin America. What role are they playing in the development of precision medicines and some of these programs and infrastructure that you've been discussing today? Yeah, Dr. Rebeo.
Yeah, usually are patients with cancer of orphan diseases. Is the usual thing. They have enough information. They usually are working together and traveling around the region and in overseas too. And they are very well updated with all of this topic. And but they are usually in cancer or orphan diseases, specifically if they have some familiar or personal matter with this.
Thank you. So supporting and improving access to rare disease information and education globally has been hugely important to us at Rare Revolution. And so being able to highlight the hopes and the works and the plans for genomic medicine in the LATAM region has been very special for us. You can really see that from the panel that infrastructure, community engagement, data collection and human capacity, as well as ethics and political engagement are all really important key areas to be addressed to help support that. I'd like to really thank all of the panelists for taking part in today's event, and to Illumina and America's Health Foundation for helping us to bring today's conversation to our listeners. Thank you all very much for joining us today and bringing us your insightful questions. And I hope that you have found the discussion stimulating and come away energized about the future of rare disease in LATAM. This rare webinar will be available on demand from the resources page of our website in the coming weeks. So do keep an eye out and share those with your networks who couldn't make it live today. Please feel free to reach out and contact us from the details shown on the contact screen shortly. We love hearing from you, and I do believe there's going to be some follow-ups. We had one question around a list of the organizations that were mentioned earlier, so those will be distributed too. So many thanks for everyone to joining today, and have a very great rest of your day.